Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of The Weekly Bubble. I'm your host, Duke Magnum, and I'm here with my co-host, Squiggy. On this show, we are going to talk about all kinds of awesome stuff, from movies to music to comic books and much more. We hope to release new episodes every week, and we hope you will continue to join us. Now on to our first segment. Let's check out this week's Showdown. In today's showdown, we are pitting two very popular bands against each other. In one corner, we have the Beatles, made up of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. They released their first album in 1963 and their last album in 1970. In the other corner, we have the Rolling Stones, made up of Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, Bill Wyman, and Charlie Watts. Of course, over the years, more members came and went, but these are the members off the first album. They released their first album in 1964 and their last album in 2016. Who will be the winner of this showdown? Let's get it started.
Okay, well, let's start off this showdown with the first round. We'll talk about songwriting. Which band do you think had better songwriting?
I personally think the Rolling Stones did.
Why is that?
I just liked the way they wrote their songs, the creativity that went into it, and like the complexity and the good metaphors they used in their songwriting.
Okay, and do you think the Beatles also had creativity as well, or no?
Oh yeah, they had creativity too. I just preferred the Rolling Stones' creativity more, but to give Beatles the credit, like they wrote good stuff as well.
They incorporated a lot of like different instruments too, right? Like,
oh yeah,
they tried to make it very like cultural, I feel like.
Oh
like,
yeah,
they had like the sitar and stuff. They used a lot of like just different instruments that you don't really hear in a lot of bands nowadays, you know.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, and then our second category. So wait, so who would take that round?
Who would take that round?
Songwriting?
That's a tough one. I would have to give it an equal on that one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So it's a tie?
It's a tie.
Okay, so it's a tie on songwriting. Then round two, we'll go with the lead guitarists. Who had the better lead guitarist?
Oh, Keith Richards, hands down.
Really, why is that?
Oh, it was very appealing and it really stood out and made you wish you could play guitar like that.
Okay. Is there a certain song that you might recommend to the listeners where they can get a good idea for those that haven't heard about Keith Richards or heard him play guitar? Maybe like they could check out a song that you might recommend?
Oh, like one I would definitely recommend is Can't Get No Satisfaction. That's really good. And I would also like recommend Under My Thumb. That's really good.
Okay.
And,
okay, so if you haven't heard Can't Get No Satisfaction or Under My Thumb, make sure you check those songs out to get an idea of some Keith Richards guitar playing. Alright, then that brings us to... So, the verdict is Rolling Stones.
Yes.
Okay. So Rolling Stones will take it for lead guitarist. Now we move on to round three. This one's an interesting one. Which band do you think aged better? By that I mean, nowadays, if you were to take a teenager in 2020 and you played Rolling Stones for them and you played the Beatles for them, who do you think would still be relevant nowadays that even young people of this time would still appreciate or like to listen to?
That's a good question. Really tough one. What do you say?
Honestly, I feel like the Beatles do bring a lot to the table. They do have a lot to offer. But just all around with like the lifestyle and the social norms of nowadays, I feel like maybe the Rolling Stones might have more of an appeal because of their they seem to have more like upbeat, more like energizing songs, you know, like of course they have their slow songs here and there, but overall if you think Rolling Stones, you think, you know, some good walking music to bob your head to, you know. And the Beatles, I feel like it's more when you're relaxing at home maybe, or
Oh yeah.
of course same thing, Beatles have their songs that might be a little bit heavier, but for the most part I feel like Beatles are more like relaxed and meant more to just like lay back and chill, you know.
Oh,
What do you
yeah.
think?
Oh, I definitely agree. Like, I think, like, if it was a teenage girl, there's a chance she might like the soothing sounds of the Beatles' voice, because they were definitely appealing to the young girls in that time.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because the Beatles came off more like a pop type of band.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Rolling Stones came off more as like a rock band.
Rock and roll with blues
Yeah.
added to it.
So I guess, yeah, you're right. I think maybe Rolling Stones would appeal more to the guys nowadays, and then
Oh yeah.
the Beatles might be more appealing to girls in our time.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
Definitely.
Okay, so then who would take it, or is it a tie?
I would say this one is another tie.
Yeah, they both aged really well, and both bands are still great to listen to even today. All right, so then our next question is, which band do you think is more overhyped?
Oh, that's an easy one. The Beatles.
Really, why is that?
Like growing up, like with TV ads, like when they would advertise music, I would hear a lot more about the Beatles, and like people I would talk to, I would hear about the Beatles probably way more than I would hear about the Rolling Stones. To be fair, I would hear some people talk about the Rolling Stones, but I would say that if you really think about it, everyone can name every member in the Beatles. That's like so easy, but not everyone can name all the members of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
So it definitely has to be the Beatles.
But do you think that also has to do with maybe they're just bigger fans of the Beatles? Or do you think it's really like overhyped?
Well, I think it's really overhyped, and I would say that knowing all the members in the Beatles' names is more like common knowledge. The Rolling Stones, you'd have to like do the research yourself to know all the members, but the Beatles, it's like you don't even have to do the research to find out who's who.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I also think that with the Beatles, they have such commercial hits. They have songs like, of course, like Rolling Stones has, you know, their songs that came out in like a lot of movies or commercials or whatever. But I do feel like the Beatles, they have like songs that pretty much like if someone has heard Let It Be, they think I'm a Beatles fan, and they buy all this merchandise, and they buy like all this Beatles stuff because it's available everywhere, of course. But I feel like, yeah, like they follow the hype that liking the Beatles is cool.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it just doesn't feel genuine with the way they like the Beatles now. Like with me and probably other fans of the Rolling Stones, you really like the music for the music, and it's not about who they are. It's about the music, I feel.
Yeah, and I feel like that's true. It should always be about the music, and sometimes people might say they like a band just based off of one song or two songs, or maybe they don't even really like the band, but because they see so many people around like it, they want to follow that trend, you know, jump on the bandwagon and kind of just go with it, you know. And of course I do think that there are like Beatles fans that know like more than just the hits, and they do like them, and by all means
of course,
those are like great, you know. I just feel like Beatles are easier for people to say, oh yeah, I like the Beatles, I've heard Yesterday, you know, or I've heard Let It Be, so, and I have a Beatles hoodie, so I'm a Beatles fan, you know.
Right.
But really there's more to it,
and another thing that makes them overhyped is the movies that they've been in that were made about them.
Oh really?
Yeah, like there was like a Hard Day's Night, Yellow Submarine, and others.
Yeah, they market themselves very like very well, so a lot of people of course knew about them and they were out there. But I do feel like, in a way, I feel like that can take away from their music, because then they become a trend. You know what I mean?
Right, they become just like sellouts that it's like you only think of the hype. You're only looking at the image. You're not getting deep into the music. And
Yeah.
that takes away, and that's why I like with the Rolling Stones that they've made more albums.
Yeah.
And you have always felt it was about the music.
Yeah, like I do think the Beatles have good music,
Right.
and of course they're a good musical group.
Yeah.
But I feel like people don't appreciate it as much because they only gravitate towards the hits, and they hear them
Yes.
so much. You hear them everywhere that you're like, oh, I know this song, but in reality, it's like you're not
Right.
really a Beatles fan. You just, like you said, it's common knowledge. You know,
Right.
everybody's heard Let It Be. Everybody's heard those songs. You know, like
Right, and the easy songs people can remember is like "I Want to Hold Your Hand" or "She Loves
Yeah.
You." Yeah, like those are not very complex enough.
yeah, and they might not even be the Beatles' best music.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot when there's musicians that they have a hit, but even on their album, it's not the best song on the album. They have better songs, but because of the hype, those songs get more attention. And overall, the Beatles have more to offer, but I feel like they do get overhyped because of their marketing, which is not a bad thing. I mean, business wise, that's great for them. You know, they made their money,
Right.
and they were huge. You know, even now they're still huge. Everybody, wherever you are from, most likely you've heard of the Beatles. You know, so I think they're definitely both very popular. But yeah, I think I have to agree with the overhype. Maybe the Beatles. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, now our next question, and I think this is the last one. Who is your favorite member of each band? And why?
Oh, now for the Beatles, definitely George Harrison and Ringo Starr.
Really, that's kind of opposite of what everybody else might say.
Right.
Well, not everyone, you know, but of course, like the big ones are John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Yeah. But why them then? Why George Harrison? Why Ringo?
Well, like I like their writing and their creativity, and I find that they're very underrated outside of the Beatles.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Well, if you think about it, like Paul McCartney's solo stuff is widely recognized, and so is John Lennon's solo stuff, also recognized, and it seems like people always gravitated towards those two. But I just personally prefer George Harrison and Ringo Starr. I like the collaborations they've done with other musicians, and I've felt they have grown as artists on their own, even if they didn't get all the attention for their solo stuff. But it wasn't really like I would argue that their solo stuff was probably better than their stuff with the Beatles, because you see them stand out on their own.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree. Even some of the Beatles songs, some of my favorite Beatles songs were written by George Harrison. You know, so it's definitely, I agree, they are pretty underrated. Of course, Paul McCartney is talented, you know, and he's a great musician, but I do agree that I would have to say George Harrison and Ringo are definitely underrated. So personally, I think I would go with George Harrison, and if I had to choose one member, but I can see your dilemma between the two, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And what about from the Rolling Stones?
Oh, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. I just like that energy Mick Jagger brings when he sings and when he's on the stage. He just brings a positive energy.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like it's important in a concert, you know, if the lead singer or, you know, the front man doesn't show that energy, doesn't show that he wants to be there, then it makes you feel like, why do I want to be here, you know?
Right.
But Mick Jagger got the moves like Jagger, you know,
Right.
he never stopped with that energy that made you feel like, man, that's the place to be at that moment, you know?
Right. And you sometimes find yourself, you want to be that guy when he brings that energy.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
And what about Keith Richards?
Oh, he brings also good energy, but with his guitar playing skills, and it makes you want to play guitar. It makes you want to play like he does.
Yeah.
And it just keeps the music going, and it's very energetic.
Okay. And before we finish this segment off, what's your favorite song? I just thought of this question. What's your favorite Beatles song, and what's your favorite Rolling Stones song?
Oh, I would say for Beatles song, While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Okay.
And another one would be Don't Let Me Down.
Okay. And what about for Rolling Stones?
Oh, I have so many to name. I could go on and on forever, but if I have to narrow it down, because there's a lot of favorites, I'll have to pick. I would say Gimme Shelter is definitely a good one. And, man, I'm trying to think of what would be the next one, because there's so many. I will have to go with Miss You.
Miss You? That's actually my favorite Rolling Stones song also, Miss You. It just has that cool vibe, you know, you put your headphones on, you're walking down the street and you just feel like untouchable, you know, like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
you know, like it just kind of gives you like a nice step sound, you know, it feels good. And for Beatles, I gotta go with Something. It's Something, and it's written by George Harrison as well, but it's a slower song, but it just has such a nice composition that it really just feels nice to listen to. There's just something about it, you know. but yeah, so that's all the time we have for this week's showdown. If you agree, if you disagree, leave a comment below. Let us know which band do you prefer. Is it the Beatles? Is it the Rolling Stones? And also leave a comment. Let us know what you think next week's showdown should be, so that we can keep these going every week and have some real interesting discussions.
And now for our final segment of this week's episode. It's a little segment we like to call Chew on This. Squiggy, let them know how it works.
Alright, so Chew on This is the last segment. It's about this week's recommendations. Duke Magnum, he's going to give you the top recommendations for this week, whether it's a movie, a music album, a TV show, a comic book, a game. It could be anything. He's filled with all sorts of good recommendations. So, Duke, take it away.
Now, for the topics we've discussed on this show, my album I recommend from Rolling Stones is called Some Girls. It's a good one for when you're working out or like driving back home from work. And yeah, really good one, released in 1978. And
so 1978, Rolling Stones, Some Girls.
Yes.
Check it out. That's the album of this week. Go ahead and chew on that. And on that note, that concludes this week's episode of the Weekly Bubble. Anything else you want to say to the people out there, Duke?
Yes. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. And remember, stay positive and don't let anyone burst your bubble. See you next week.